Okay, so welcome to lecture 13. You remember we talked about the different approaches to measure performance, that was behavior approach, result approach and trait approach. We are not going to discuss trait approach, because sometimes it is considered as a part of the behavior, especially your traits, your characteristics, your personality, which could be considered as a part of your behavior, which might lead to better performance, right. But it is not a direct measure of performance. So, we are excluding that. So, we are basically focusing on these two things, that is behavior and results. So, in this section or in this lecture you can say we are going to focus on these two aspects, that how we are going to measure behavior and results, because it is very important when it comes to measuring performance, because in order to measure performance you have to see that what are the different kind of systems that you use to measure performance, right. So, in this case we have to say that how we are going to measure performance and results both. So, we will start with results, that how we are going to measure results. Okay. Now, when it comes to measuring results, and we say that it is the performance standards or the targets that a person has to meet, right. Now, once this performance criteria that is established, you are going to measure the individual performance against the same performance criteria, and there are three factors which are very important. Okay. So, at the first stage what you do? You identify the different areas, or what you know as key accountability areas or key performance areas or the key result areas. Then in each area what you do? You try to find out what are the specific objectives that you have, and for each specific area you also identify the kind of standards that you want to achieve, right. So, let us take an example when it comes to measuring results, right. So, what we will do, we will take up an example to explain how we are going to measure results. So, when it comes to measuring results, we talked about three things: key accountability, right. Then we talked about objectives, and then we talked about standards. Now, let us discuss in a particular case, say a faculty. This example I am giving because you can better understand this. So, first of all we are going to identify say three important accountability or areas which contribute maximum to the performance, right. So, this could be for example, teaching, research, training and consulting, right. Now, the key accountability areas have been identified. This is what we also know as key result areas or key performance indicators, right. Okay. Now, once we have been able to identify these key accountability areas, the next task is that you are going to identify the objectives, right. So, you are going to set objectives which is going to be very specific in all the three cases. So, say for example, in first case that is teaching, second case that is what we call research, and the third case that is what we know as training and consulting, right. So, how specific objectives means 2 courses per semester, okay, and with a good feedback, because feedback that could be say greater than 4.0, right. So, this is a specific objectives that you are going to teach 2 courses effectively, so that you get a good feedback about these courses, right. This is related to the first one. So, you have established a specific objective in this case. Second is standard, second objective, that is related to the research. Okay. So, you say that you are going to publish at least 2 papers annually in refereed journals, which is what is Scopus index. So, this become a very specific objective, the quality is maintained here. You are teaching 2 courses and you expect to publish 2 papers annually, that is going to be your specific objectives, right. Now, third is training and consulting. So, conducting at least one training program. Time frame is important annually, okay. Then not only one conducting one training program, but also generating revenue at least 20 lakhs through consulting activities. Now, what happens? You have identified both the things, objectives, and you have also defined the standards here, right. So, that when you say 2 courses, it means you have specified the objectives against which your performance is to be evaluated. Publishing 2 papers, that is the performance standards, one training program and 20 lakh revenue generation, that is another standard related to training and consulting. So, what you need to identify when it comes to measuring results, and all this is very objective, right. So, the performance, teaching performance is measured through feedback, course performance or publications is measured specifically to see that it is published in a Scopus index journal, and when you are looking at standards, you make sure that you are meeting these performance standards, which I have mentioned here, right. So, we talked about 3 things: key accountability, objectives and standards. So, standards are performance standards against which your performance is going to be evaluated. Now, getting back to the earlier one, now you see we have been talking about these kind of things. Key accountabilities, right. So, when it comes to determining key accountabilities, what are the things that we need to do? Do you remember we talked about accountabilities, okay, and objectives and standards. So, when it comes to determining accountabilities, what actually happens? You are going to collect data through job description, right. So, when I am talking about job description specifically, it talks about what? The tasks, duties and responsibilities, and also job specifications, the knowledge and skill that is required by the individual to perform the job, right. So, the first step in collecting information about the job is through job description. So, we have identified this for a faculty, that is teaching, research, training and consulting, right, and this comes from what? This comes from the job analysis of the faculty, right, okay. And this has to be aligned with the department's goal and also the organization goal, because organization has a goal that we are going to publish say 100 papers, and if you have 50 faculty, so each faculty is going to contribute 2 papers. If you are going to generate say 10 crore rupees, so every faculty is to generate 20 lakh rupees. So, your objective is aligned with the organizational goals and objectives, and your performance standards are also decided. So, depending upon your key accountability areas, you are going to contribute to the performance, right. So, once this job analysis is done, and it is ensured that yes, organizational level strategic priorities are met, through this you are going to perform your job, right. So, the task that is included in your job description, okay. So, you identify the clusters of tasks, like number of tasks and duties that you are going to perform and how they are related, right. So, your teaching, research, training, consulting, everything is related with each other, and that is going to form the accountability. So, the accountability or the key accountability or the key performance of areas of a individual comes from where? It comes from the job description, and these key accountability areas contribute maximum to your performance. So, if you know what your key accountability areas are, you know what are the objectives of each of these key accountability areas, what are the standards against which your performance will be measured against each key result areas, then you will be able to produce better results. Now, once you are able to determine key accountabilities, then you have to see that how much importance you are giving to each of these key accountabilities, right. Now, when you are going to give relative importance, you have to see whether are you going to spend equal amount on these three activities. Say for example, we talked about three performance areas: teaching, research and training and consulting. Now, how much time we are going to spend on these activities? How much important this it is in terms of, you need to also set priority for each of these areas, right. So, as a faculty your major job is teaching. So, you are going to spend more time, it is 50% weightage, right, because that is your primary job. Next could be you are going to spend say 25%, here you are going to spend 50% of your time, 25% of your time, 25% of your time, and this could be 25% important, 25% important, right. So, what you have done here, that you have identified your key accountability areas and you see that how much time you are going to spend on each of the areas, how much weightage, relative weightage you have given to each, because accordingly you are going to measure his performance, right. So, for a teacher, teaching feedback is the most important thing. Next is what are his publications and research, and then how much training and consulting activity he is engaged in, because this is related to revenue generation, right. This is related to brand recognition, right, and also the employee recognition, and this is related to his own teaching, related to the feedback. So, what I am trying to tell you here is that when you are going to identify the relative importance of this, you need to look at it, that how much your time you are going to spend on each accountability areas, right. So, and how each of these accountability areas are contributing to your job performance. Okay. So, whether it is having a significant impact or not, that is one thing, and what is the difference, if there is any error or not. For example, you are a quality control manager and one of your concern is to ensure that rejection rate is 1%, not more than 1%. So, in case of a quality control manager, if the rejection rate is assumed to be 1%, it means that if rejection rate is more than 1%, you are making an error. Okay. So, if you are making say 5% rejection error, it means there is a significant consequences or error, because the product cost will go up, because those projects are going to be rejected and it is going to be a cost to the organization, right. So, it is very important to ensure that all key accountability areas are identified well, they are prioritized. The employee should know that the extent to which it is important to them. So, they could go for giving relative importance, weightage to each of the key accountability areas, and in order to perform these jobs, they also need to see that how it is going to affect the employees. Okay. That is also important in terms of loss of time or money and these kind of things. For example, if you are not engaging in teaching well, probably that is going to contribute much to your performance, right, because you are engaging more in research and these kind of things, but you are not doing your primary job, that is more important. So, what I mean to say is that you are losing time, money, everything, but you are not doing your job very well. So, ensure that you are focusing on your key accountability areas, and moreover make sure that you go for relative priorities, see that which is one is more important, which contributes more. So, spend more time, make sure that you are doing your job effectively. So, making less error, because it is going to be not cost effective, right. So, these are the issues related to accountabilities. Now, I am taking one example here to explain how we go about determining accountability. So, this is an HR role and the company is known as data consulting. So, you can see that data consulting there is a specific role like training specialist or consultant, and his job description is given. So, job description of a training specialist is what? Identifying the training need analysis of the worker, designing, developing and delivery of training, evaluating training, providing leadership and also taking strategic responsibility for the growth and development of the employees, right. So, this is the job description which suggests, and based on this you can identify the key accountabilities, process leadership, supervision of non-exempt staff, coaching, team building, assessment instruments, feedback, product improvement. So, whatever training is provided. So, based on all this training you can identify what are the key accountability areas, right. Once you have been able to identify key accountability areas, your next job is what? To look at the priority, which one is more important. Providing leadership to the team is more important, okay, or team building activity is more important, of assessment of the employees in terms of ensuring better performance is more important, or the kind of training that is being offered to see that with the training, because training is the product here. So, how it can be made more effective by getting feedback from the employees and to see that it is going to be effective, right. So, when I am giving this example of data consulting, the idea here is to ensure that you are able to look at the job description to start with, and then you are able to identify the key accountability areas, right. Now, after identifying key accountability areas, the next thing is that you are going to determine the objectives, and when it comes to determining the objective, you have to ensure that it is measurable, right. So, say for example, the case that I had given here earlier, like in the case of a salesman, you say that okay, these are the targets that he needs to meet, right, like number of customers added, number of deals closed, number of sales that he has made, right, number of customers retained by the employees, right. So, this is the objectives, but here you are going to be very specific, how many customers he is going to retain, how many deals he is going to close, how many sales that he has achieved, right. So, what you are going to do here is that objectives are nothing else but statements of important and measurable outcomes. So, in different case it could be different, right. So, you need to identify key result area, and for each key result areas you see that what are the results, right, which will have a dramatic impact or significant impact on the success of the employees. For example, if we look at the same case, say a sales manager, right. So, a sales manager basically is responsible for what? Having loyal customers, retained customers, new customers, sales figures, number of units sold, right. Suppose you say that these are the result areas. Okay. So, when you are going to specify objective, in this case you are going to identify how many, right. I am just giving hypothetical examples, right. So, what does this show? This shows specific figures related to a sales managers. So, you are going to not only identify the key result areas, but for each key result areas you are going to specify the objectives which a person has to achieve, right. Now, this objective is measured against what? The performance standard, right. So, when it comes to determining objectives, you have to see that once you are able to specify objectives, you will be able to provide feedback, and you also see that what are the things that is required by the individual in terms of support, right, and also if he is able to do it, how it is linked with the reward, right. So, when it comes to determining objective, try to be specific to ensure that person knows and it is communicated and it is dependent upon what you call what he is supposed to achieve. Now, when it comes to identifying objectives, you also need to look at what is the characteristics of a good objective. It has to be specific and clear. For example, you are saying that okay, you need to cut cost by 20%, so it is very specific. It has to be challenging, depending upon the requirement you can stretch it, reduce it, or you can increase it also. Make sure that it is agreed upon by everybody between the manager and supervisors that okay, this is the objective that we want to achieve. Make sure that it is significantly contributing to the performance and success of the employees, right. And you also go for prioritizing your objectives. For example, in case of teaching, I said okay, teaching is the most important priority, right. And make sure that it is bound by time, because you have deadlines and mileposts within which you are going to achieve these goals and objectives, and make sure that it is achievable. So, whatever objectives you are going to set, you need to ensure that it could be achieved within a given time frame, okay. And people should be communicated that yes, this is what we need to achieve, okay. So, if you are going to follow these, probably you will be able to set very good objective, which is going to provide a better communication to the employees. Coming to the third point, determining performance standards. And when I am talking about performance standards, you have to see that performance standards are what? They are the criteria against which the performance is to be evaluated, right. For example, the number of sales figure shows that he is able to sell 50 units, but the standard is say 100 units. It means that he is only able to reach 50% of his performance targets, right. If the sales figure shows that he is able to generate 50 lakh rupees, while the target shows that he is supposed to achieve 75 lakh rupees. What does it mean? It means that he has not been able to reach the target, and that is why for each of these objectives you need to set standards, and then his performance is compared against the standard. So, these standards are designed to understand that okay, what you need to achieve, okay. And those who are going to evaluate performance, they also know that okay, this is the standard against which the performance of the people is to be achieved, and what is the level of performance that the person has achieved got, right. So, it is related to specific objectives including quality, quantity and time. For example, how many, what kind of product you have sold and within which period, right. So, suppose it is a financial year and you expect a salesman to sell a number of products. So, it you are talking about quality within a time frame, say 6 months, that you are talking about time and what kind of product you are selling, right. So, the quality. So, everything is to be covered when you are talking about the specific objectives, right, and that is how we go about determining performance standards. Now, when we are talking about performance standards, 3 factors are very important: quality, quantity and time, right, correct. I will give an example to explain it further. For example, say when I am saying the objectives related to say research and publications, and you have 3 criteria related to performance, that is quality, quantity and time, right. These are the 3 criteria against which you are going to publish, and you have a specific objectives, right, that is identified. Now, you have to see whether this outcome is meeting these performance criteria or not. In terms of quality, quantity you are meeting this, in terms of quality is questionable, because your publications in what kind of journals, are they in quality journals. Now, this quality has to be specified, like it is in Scopus index journal or not. If it is Scopus index or it meets certain criteria parameters, it is referred journals, then you can say that it is meeting the quality, otherwise not, and say evaluation period is 1 year. So, you need to ensure that it is published within a 1 year, right. So, we are talking about 3 things: quality, quantity and time. So, for each and every objective you need to decide the performance standards, which has 3 dimensions: quality, quantity and time, and the performance is measured against this only, right. So, quality, how well the objectives have been achieved, right. Quantity, how much has been achieved, how much has been produced, how many, right, how often, at what costs, right. So, make sure that it is cost effective, and time, due dates are there, whether you have been added to schedules, cycle times, deadlines are met or not. For example, a production person, you have to say that you are going to meet the schedules of production. Okay. You are able to produce n number of items within a given time frame, which meets the quality standards, right. So, you are meeting all the 3 criteria: quality, quantity and time. Now, moving to the next part, here I am giving 2 examples of standards here. So, when I am talking about standards, it include action, result, due date and also the quality and quantity indicator. So, now if you look at this example, which says that reduce overtime from 150 hours per month to 50 hours per month by December 1, 2017 at a cost not exceeding $12,000, right. What are the action that you are going to take? You are going to reduce it. What is the due date? 2017 December, right. And what is expected is that quality and the quantity indicator is there, that you are going to reduce overtime by 100 hours per month, right, from now onwards. So, this you are talking about the standard that you are going to achieve. Now, once you have achieved these standards, so as soon as this standard has been created, one can create standards that describe minimum performance and outstanding performance. So, there are 2 things when I am talking about performance. Are you meeting the standard targets, are the performance targets, that is minimum, or you are talking about outstanding performance. For example, when you say that you are going to reduce overtime from 150 hours to 40 hours per month, it means that you are talking about something that is beyond the minimum performance, right. From 50 hours to you are reducing it to 40 hours, okay, by October 1, 2018 at the same cost. So, it means that you are talking about outstanding performance. Now, if you look at these 2 examples, one talks about the minimum or standard performance, the other talks about the outstanding performance. Now, the question here is that whether you want to achieve minimum performance or whether you want to achieve standard performance. Okay. Now, what are the characteristics of a good performance? Make sure that performance is related to the job the person is doing. It is very concrete, specific and measurable, as I told you, right. Reducing overtime within a time frame, and how much overtime you are going to reduce, that is measurable, right. And it is practical to measure, it is easy to measure, right, and it makes sense, because you say that okay, from 150 hours you want to make it to 140 hours. So, it does not make sense, because it is not significant, okay, and make sure that it is realistic and achievable. You are able to achieve it within a given time frame, and when you are going to set this standard, it is set in such a way, so that it looks realistic, somewhat challenging, which could be achieved within a given time frame. Okay. So, make a realistic assessment of the standards, and then you go for regular review to ensure that whether you will be able to achieve it or not, and what actions are required by the manager and the individual to ensure that he is able to achieve those targets, right. Now, we are going to talk about the next part, that is related to behavior. Now, when it comes to behavior, basically you are talking about the competencies, that is the knowledge and skill base, right, okay, which is related to knowledge, skill and abilities. Okay. It also contributes to performance. So, behaviors are nothing else but competencies. So, you need to assess competencies, like how well you serve your customers, what kind of communication skills you have, how you take decisions, whether are you creative in your thinking, okay, or whether your integrity is established, okay, whether you are dependable or consistent in your approach. So, these are the competencies. These are some examples which could be related to different kind of jobs. Okay. This is not something that is specific to a given job. So, what I mean to say here is that you also need to measure competencies to ensure that you are able to do your job well. Now, what are the different kind of competencies? Okay. Differentiating competencies and threshold competencies. Threshold competencies mean that you are having the minimum standard or minimum competency, knowledge and skill base to reach to a standard performance level, right. And differentiating competencies means that you are above average. So, your performance would be much better. So, those who have threshold competencies, they would be able to achieve standard performance level, and those who are differentiating themselves or having high level of competencies, they would be able to reach above average and superior performance. For example, If you look here, I have given two examples, example of an IT project manager and example of a professor, right. So, example of IT manager, see what is the differentiating competencies? A process management, ability to manage project activities, and what is the threshold competencies? Change management, knowledge of behavioral science, operational skills and sensitivity to motivate, right. So, this you are able to identify both. So, what kind of competencies would lead to standard performance and what kind of competencies would lead to superior performance, right. So, people need to have both kind of competencies, but if you do not have differentiating competencies, probably you will not be able to perform well. For example, in case of professor, effective communication, despite his knowledge and skill base and conveying information within a given time frame, probably one is related to differentiating competency and the other one related to threshold competencies, right. So, there are the two different kind of competencies that we are talking about. Look at another example here. There is one competency that is known as leadership. So, leadership is a competency, right. Now, this competency has 5 indicators 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right. What are these competencies? Support subordinate projects, ask about the well-being of the employees life outside the work, encourage subordinates to reach their established goals, get to know employees personally, show respect for employees. So, all if you look at all these competencies, which shows his leadership competencies, it could be at the threshold level or it could be differentiating, right, depending upon the extent to which this is present, right. So, that is how we are going to talk about the competencies. Now, what are the different kind of competencies, are the components of the competencies? First, you have to define a competency, what do you mean by leadership, right. Then you also talk about the different indicators of the competencies, right. Next, what are the behaviors that you relate with each of these competencies, and what level of competency is being shown by the individual. Okay. But this measurement of competency is judgmental, right. Judgmental depends upon the judgment of the supervisors, line managers, HR managers, right. So, based on identifying the these competencies, we are going to measure the competencies, right. So, this is measured depending upon the data that is given by the individuals, right. So, it is based upon the judgment that the level of competency that is present or not present in the individuals, and how he is going to make this judgment depending upon the behavior that is displayed by the individuals, right, or the raters. Okay. Thank you very much.